The 7 worst and best breads for blood sugar, according to science. Do you usually choose whole wheat bread because you think it's always healthier than white bread? If your answer is yes, you're not alone. For many years, we were taught that switching from white bread to whole grain bread was one of the best decisions for controlling blood sugar, protecting heart health, and even preventing diabetes. But science shows that the story is not that simple. Some breads labeled as whole grain can cause blood sugar spikes very similar to white bread. In other words, millions of people believe they're making a healthy choice, when in reality, they may not be getting the benefits they expect. The problem is not only the amount of fiber. There's a much more important factor that most people are not aware of: how the bread is actually made. In this video, you're going to discover a science-based ranking of the 7 most common types of bread, starting from the ones that raise blood sugar the most, all the way to the one that shows the most favorable metabolic response in the body. After watching this, you will probably never look at bread the same way again, or choose it based only on the packaging. The biggest myth about bread. Many people believe that simply buying whole wheat bread is enough to automatically reduce blood sugar spikes. And at first, that makes sense. After all, whole grain foods contain more fiber. But there's another factor that has a major influence on how fast sugar enters the bloodstream: the physical structure of the food itself. Think about a whole wheat grain. Its outer layers naturally make it harder for digestive enzymes to access the starch inside, which slows down digestion. Now imagine that same grain transformed into an extremely fine flour. Even if it is still whole grain, its natural structure has essentially been destroyed. It's like comparing an ice cube to crushed ice. Both are made of the same substance, but crushed ice melts much faster because it has a much larger surface area exposed. The same principle applies to flour. The smaller the particles, the easier it is for the body to break down starch into glucose, and the faster blood sugar can rise. The same thing happens with flour. The smaller the particles are, the faster the body can convert starch into glucose. That's why some studies have found a surprising result. Certain commercial whole grain breads can produce a glycemic response very similar to white bread. Because of this, modern researchers no longer look only at fiber content. They also analyze the level of processing, the fermentation process, and the actual structure of the food. And that is exactly what we're going to explore in this ranking. 7th place, honey wheat bread. We begin with what might be one of the biggest marketing examples in the entire food industry: honey wheat bread. The packaging usually gives the impression of something natural, healthy, and wholesome. But once you look at the ingredient list, the reality becomes very different. In many brands, the first ingredient is refined wheat flour. And since ingredients are listed by quantity, that means most of the bread is still made from refined flour. Many people assume that honey is the main issue here, but in reality, it is usually present in very small amounts. The biggest factor affecting blood sugar is actually the highly processed flour itself, which is quickly digested and can lead to glucose spikes. Some versions may also include syrups or added sugars to improve flavor and texture. Another important concept here is the so-called health halo effect. When we believe a food is healthy, we tend to eat more of it without realizing it. And that can significantly increase the total carbohydrate load of the meal. So despite its healthy appearance, this bread takes the last place in our ranking. Score 2 out of 10. 6th place, commercial whole wheat bread. Now we move on to the bread that is probably found in millions of households. Commercial whole wheat bread does contain more fiber than white bread, and that is definitely a positive point. The problem is that many of these products are made with heavily processed whole wheat flour. In practice, the grain structure is still broken down during milling. So even though fiber is present, part of the natural protection that slows digestion is reduced. That's why some studies have found glycemic responses in certain commercial whole wheat breads that are very similar to white bread. Does this mean all whole wheat bread is bad? No. It simply means there is a huge difference between highly industrialized whole wheat bread and bread made with less processed grains and proper fermentation. Another common mistake is trusting the front of the package. Labels like 100% whole grain, high in fiber, or natural do not automatically guarantee a lower impact on blood sugar. The most reliable habit is still reading the ingredient list. The simpler it is, and the less processed the ingredients are, the higher the chance of finding a better quality product. For these reasons, commercial whole wheat bread receives a score of 3 out of 10. But the next one might be even more misleading. Its name makes it sound healthy, but in reality, everything depends on how it is actually made. That's where we begin the discussion of multi-grain bread. Fifth place, multi-grain bread. Not always what it seems. We are now arriving at one of the most misleading names you will find on supermarket shelves, multi-grain bread. When we see this word, it's natural to assume we are looking at a much healthier option. After all, the term multi-grain gives the impression of variety, fiber, and higher nutritional value. But there's an important detail that most people are not aware of. Multi-grain does not necessarily mean whole grains. A bread can contain wheat, oats, corn, barley, or rye, and still be made primarily with refined flour. In other words, it may include several types of grains, yet still have a very similar impact on blood sugar as regular white bread. The real secret is in the ingredient list. If the first ingredient is refined wheat flour, that means it makes up the majority of the recipe. The other grains may only be present in small amounts, mainly for appearance or marketing appeal. That's why many people believe they're making a healthy choice, when in reality, they're simply buying white bread with a few added seeds. On the other hand, there are truly high-quality multi-grain breads. When they're made with whole wheat, whole oats, whole rye, and other minimally processed grains, they tend to preserve more of their natural structure and usually produce a more favorable blood sugar response. Texture can also give you important clues. Denser breads that require more chewing are often less processed than those that are extremely soft and airy. The main lesson here is simple. Don't buy bread based on the name on the package. Buy it based on the ingredients. For this reason, multi-grain bread receives 2 different ratings in this ranking. When made mostly with refined flour, 4 out of 10 when made with true whole grains and minimally processed ingredients, 7 out of 10. Fourth place, whole wheat pita bread. How you eat it matters too. The 4th place goes to whole wheat pita bread. It is often associated with the Mediterranean diet, which leads many people to assume it is automatically one of the healthiest choices available. But once again, the answer depends on how this bread is made, and more importantly, how it is consumed. In order to make it thin, soft, and able to form that characteristic pocket, many pita breads are produced using very finely milled flour. This makes digestion easier and can lead to faster carbohydrate absorption. Even in its whole wheat version, the glycemic impact is usually moderate rather than low. But there is another even more important factor to consider. No food should be evaluated in isolation. Imagine 2 meals. In the first, a person eats pita bread on its own, along with a sugary drink. In the second, someone uses the same pita bread to prepare a sandwich filled with grilled chicken, eggs, white cheese, leafy greens, tomato, and a drizzle of olive oil. Even though the bread is exactly the same, the body's response can be completely different. That's because protein, healthy fats, and fiber slow down digestion, reducing the speed at which glucose enters the bloodstream. Another very common mistake is portion size. Because pita bread looks small and light, many people end up eating 2 or even 3 without realizing it. By the end of the meal, the total carbohydrate intake can be much higher than expected. This is why, instead of demonizing individual foods, it's more important to learn how to build balanced meals. Whole wheat pita can absolutely be part of a healthy diet, especially when combined with good sources of protein and vegetables. For this reason, it takes 4th place in the ranking and scores 5 out of 10. But now we are entering the point where the quality of bread starts to truly change. 3rd place, sprouted grain bread, when nature becomes part of the process. We are now entering the top 3. And the first bread that truly stands out is sprouted grain bread, also known as sprouted bread. Its main advantage appears even before the baking process begins. Instead of using only dry grains, producers allow them to begin the natural process of germination. When this happens, various enzymes become activated and the grain's internal composition starts to change. Part of the starch is used during this process, while certain compounds, such as phytic acid, tend to decrease. This reduction may improve the absorption of important minerals like iron, magnesium, and zinc. In addition, many of these breads preserve more of the grain's natural structure, avoiding extremely fine milling. The result is typically slower digestion and a more balanced glycemic response compared to most highly processed commercial breads. Another benefit is increased satiety. Because these breads are denser and require more chewing, they often help control appetite more effectively throughout the day. But attention, not every bread labeled sprouted on the package is actually made primarily from sprouted grains. Once again, the rule that has guided this entire video applies. Always read the ingredient list. The first ingredients should clearly state sprouted wheat, sprouted rye, or other sprouted grains. The shorter the ingredient list, and the lower the level of processing, the better. Although it is still a source of carbohydrates, sprouted grain bread represents a much more interesting option for those looking to better manage blood sugar levels. For this reason, it earns third place in our ranking with a score of 7.5 out of 10. But the top two entries deliver even better results. And the next one might be the most unknown bread on the entire list, even though it shows one of the lowest impacts on blood sugar. That's what we are going to explore next. Second place, pumpernickel bread, the power of rye and slow baking. We now arrive at second place in the ranking. And here we have a bread that many people have never even heard of, yet it has very interesting properties when it comes to blood sugar control. We are talking about true pumpernickel bread. First, it's important to make a distinction. Not every dark bread sold as pumpernickel is actually traditional. Many products use coloring agents, molasses, or malts simply to mimic a darker, more rustic appearance. But authentic pumpernickel is different. It is made primarily with whole rye, a grain that naturally contains more soluble fiber and is digested more slowly than refined wheat. These fibers help form a gel-like substance in the digestive system, which slows stomach emptying and reduces the speed at which carbohydrates are absorbed. But the real key difference is in the preparation. Traditional pumpernickel undergoes an extremely slow baking process, which can last many hours, sometimes up to 24 hours. During this time, part of the starch is converted into resistant starch, which is not rapidly digested by the body. This type of starch moves more slowly through the digestive system and can even serve as food for beneficial gut bacteria and the microbiome. The result is typically a lower and more stable blood sugar response after meals. Another interesting point is that rye-based breads may also produce a more moderate insulin response compared to some refined wheat breads. In addition, its texture is dense and compact, which naturally leads to slower eating and greater satiety. But it's important to note, this is not a light or soft bread like most commercial loaves. Its flavor is stronger, and its texture is much firmer, which may not appeal to everyone at first. Still, from a metabolic standpoint, it performs very well. For this reason, true pumpernickel takes second place in the ranking with a score of 8.5 out of 10. First place, sourdough, natural fermentation, the most studied bread for blood sugar. And finally, we arrive at first place. The winner is sourdough bread, or naturally fermented bread. But there is an important warning here as well. Not every bread labeled as sourdough is truly traditional. Many industrial products simply use the name while still relying on fast commercial yeast fermentation. True sourdough is made with a living natural starter, formed by wild yeasts and lactic acid bacteria that slowly ferment the dough. This process can take anywhere from 12 to 24 hours, or even longer. During this time, these microorganisms consume part of the sugars in the dough and produce organic acids, such as lactic acid and acetic acid. These compounds have an important effect on the body. They help slow down digestion and reduce the rate at which carbohydrates are absorbed. In practice, this leads to a more gradual release of glucose into the bloodstream. In addition, natural fermentation may partially reduce phytic acid, improving the availability of minerals such as iron, magnesium, and zinc. Another important point is that the structure of the bread changes during fermentation, which may make it easier to digest for some people. Important, it still contains gluten and is not suitable for people with celiac disease. However, for the general population, especially when compared to ultra-processed breads, it tends to show a more favorable metabolic response. And its benefits become even stronger when it is made with whole grain flour or less refined grains. In this case, we get a combination of less processed, grain, slow fermentation, better glycemic response, greater satiety. That's why sourdough is often considered one of the best bread options within a balanced diet. It takes first place in our ranking with a score of 9.5 out of 10. The real takeaway. After analyzing all these types of bread, one thing becomes very clear. The problem was never simply bread itself. The real issue lies in the level of processing, the quality of the ingredients, and the way the food is produced. Not all whole wheat bread is healthy. Not all dark bread is better. And not all fitness or healthy labeled breads actually help control blood sugar. What truly makes the difference is understanding the type of flour used, the degree of processing, the type of fermentation, and the structure of the food itself. Once you understand this, you stop relying only on marketing claims on packaging, and you start making more conscious choices. You don't need to eliminate bread from your diet. You just need to learn how to choose better. Now tell me, which of these breads do you usually eat in your daily life? Did you already know that some whole grain breads can have a similar impact to white bread? Leave a comment. It helps other people as well. If this video helped you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Here you'll find science-based content explained in a simple way, without exaggeration and without miracle promises. Thank you for watching until the end, and I'll see you in the next video.